Hello. So today we're going to talk about readerly versus writerly books. And for that, I'm going to pull out my Dictionary of Literary Terms, Literary Theory. I'm going to read you some definitions. So we first get to our R's. Am I just reading this straight through? Absolutely. And it's giving me a lot of video ideas. So readerly/writerly, terms devised by Roland Barthes, the French critic, to make a distinction between two basic kinds of text, the visible, readerly, and the scriptable, writerly. He expounds on this in book SZ. By a readerly text, he means a book, a novel, say, to which a reader's response is more or less passive. For example, a realistic novel or any classic text, as Barthes terms them, presents to us a recognizable world with easily recognizable characters and events. The reader accepts the meaning without needing to make much effort. A writerly text, however, makes demands on the reader. He or she has to work things out, look for, and provide meaning. Obvious examples of writerly texts are Joyce's Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake. A writerly text tends to focus attention on how it is written, on the mechanics of it, the particular use of language. A writerly text tends to be self-conscious. It calls attention to itself as a work of art. It also makes the reader a producer. Barthes makes the point that the writerly text is of value because the goal of literary work, of literature as work, is to make the reader no longer a consumer but a producer of the text. However, as Barthes demonstrates in his analysis of Balzac's short story Sarrasine, which is basically a readerly story but which Barthes discusses as a writerly one, a critic may, if he or she wishes, read any story as either writerly or readerly. A readerly or writerly reading is not inherent in the text but may be part of the reading. So that's a lot of words to say. Readerly, basically, does give, is more escapism literature, and writerly is definitely takes a lot more effort. But one thing that I really wanted to point out in there was how they mentioned that anybody can make any text writerly if they assign more meaning to it than it actually has. And I do think that a big problem with a lot of modern book consumers is the need for everything to be 100% readerly. If you look at people like Colleen Hoover, she's very readerly. She definitely is. She just gives you very basic plots, very basic characters, to a point where you can really, I forget whose video I was watching that pointed this out, but her characters are so basic that you can really slap anything onto there. I think it was some anti-intellectualism thing. I think it was probably Rachel Oates or something. But then again, if you really wanted to, I don't know. I don't know anybody who's attempted to read deeper meaning into Colleen Hoover's books, like to a point where it would become writerly. It'll be interesting. And so thinking about my main genre, which is horror, my thought here, a readerly versus a writerly text, I think honestly I'm gonna have to go to the two Stephens. Stephen King, I would say, is very readerly. Stephen King is such a easy, accessible author, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, Stephen King was my favorite author for many years, but he's very accessible, and he's very much a very good starting place for horror. A lot, both in terms of the fact that a lot of horror things reference his work. It's like he is the reference, so he's not referencing things that you may or may not be comfortable with or know about as a beginning horror reader. But also in the fact that he is really just, his writing style is very easy to slip into, and his characters and his worlds are so complete and so familiar in a lot of ways. Stephen Graham Jones, on the other hand, not only is his writing style a little bit more difficult for people, it's a little bit more stream of consciousness. The definition did mention Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, and I'm not saying that Stephen Graham Jones is on the same level as James Joyce, but I'm saying that stream of consciousness writing is not as easy to comprehend as standard sentence structure, you know. But as well as that, Stephen Graham Jones does read the best if you are a really big horror fan, because Stephen Graham Jones is a really big horror fan. And I haven't read I Was a Teenage Slasher yet. It's in the book wall, but one thing that I've seen a lot of people have a lot of issues with I Was a Teenage Slasher was the fact that if they're not big fans of your classic slasher movies, they don't really get it, and you don't really get all the references, and it's not as exciting and fun. And I found a lot of the reasons why My Heart is a Chainsaw was so exciting and fun is because I know all the references in My Heart is a Chainsaw. I think that's super fun. I know the tropes, and it is in like was mentioned in in the definition, it is very aware of itself as a work of horror literature. It really is. Our main character Jade is very aware of that, of her status in the horror novel. She knows she's not a final girl, which is very interesting. It's a very interesting kind of route to take, and it is very self-aware in that regard. And his other books are similar, but I do think that nothing really. Game I haven't read I Was a Teenage Slasher yet. I do not think that anything really hits that writerly side of things quite as much as My Heart is a Chainsaw does, because I think My Heart is a Chainsaw really does hit that nice sweet spot there, and in a way that kind of makes it, again, like very, very satisfying for the reader who is aware of all of these little things. And I'm sure that writerly and readerly, when they're talking about this, they are not really speaking as much about genre things, because this is a dictionary of literature's literary theory. It has made its its stance on horror and genre fiction very clear, but horror as a genre has the capacity to be exceedingly writerly. I mean, there is so much in horror that is self-referential, and horror kind of needs to be aware of itself as art, or it's not really gonna, it's either gonna flow exploitation, which is not a bad thing. I love exploitation as much as the next person, or it's gonna flow really clinical, because it isn't able to handle itself without being aware of itself as art. If we take a look at something like Exquisite Corpse, Exquisite Corpse is art. Clive Barker is art. Clark Ashton Smith is art. You look at Aaron Beauregard, and I don't quite know if he is. Even if we take out Richard Lehman is exploitation. Richard Lehman is readerly. Stuff like Poppy Z. Brite and Clive Barker are writerly, and you see both of these people being brought up on splatterpunk lists, but Richard Lehman is simpler. He's more straightforward, and he's very much more of the readerly type, whereas Poppy Z. Brite, Exquisite Corpse, I gotta reread that book, it's so good. Exquisite Corpse is very much more writerly. It takes a little bit more work, and it is more aware of itself as a piece of art. I guess because I consider it to actually be art. I don't know if I love Lehman. I do. I don't know if I consider him to be art. I really don't. Then if we look at like Clive Barker versus Jack Ketchum, Clive Barker and Jack Ketchum, both of them also referred to as splatterpunk. Clive Barker, I think, is art. Jack Ketchum is exploitation. And again, there's nothing wrong with exploitation. I can enjoy an exploitation novel or exploitation flick. Exploitation to me becomes really, really good and really, really something you can sink your teeth into if it is aware it's being an exploitation thing and it is willing to lean fully into that. I'm not going to get into my extreme horror or splatterpunk thing right now, but where I think a lot of modern extreme horror novels go wrong, where they don't really become exploitation, is because they are too concerned with showing you every detail that they forget to show you the heat behind it. And if we look at other things, Bret Easton Ellis, sometimes it gets brought up when we talk about splatterpunk, mostly regarding American Psycho, which I have not read, but again, it's back there. But I've read Glamorama and The Shards, and both of those, again, are a little bit more writerly. Bret Easton Ellis is a bit more pretentious than the other authors I've mentioned. I mean, he's a bit more pretentious than Stephen Graham Jones and Poppy Z. Brite and Clive Barker. But that pretension does, I think, allow him to be a little bit more writerly too. I mean, he's elevated in a way into the literary fiction sphere, and I think literary fiction really tries to be writerly a lot of the time. I don't know if it always is. I think with our current fascination with really quick, easy books, and I haven't read anything by Sally Rooney. I have Intermezzo on the book wall, but I feel like she is currently the lit fic author du jour, and I don't know just how good she is, the fact that she is, again, I haven't read anything by her, but the fact that she's the lit fic author du jour, when du jour tends to be pretty pared down, I don't know. I guess I'll have to read something by her and actually kind of see where she stands, see if the literary fiction world is holding up, or if it is going down the route of horror, which I'm gonna say, talking about the extreme horror stuff, and not say there's not some good horror being published right now. There is, but if we take the worst of the worst, it's not going well. If we take the really popular, you know how much money fucking Aaron Beauregard makes every year? It's a ton. Or romance. stuff like that. It's all kind of very, has become very pared down and clinical, and we can't quite understand metaphor anymore, which I'm sure is a part of the larger literacy crisis. But I do think that in order for the literacy crisis to really kind of get kicked back against, we do need to be a little bit more writerly. And I'm talking as somebody who writes genre fiction, somebody who is not consider herself very pretentious in a lot of ways. I think honestly we need to become a little bit more writerly. That's my thesis there, and that is everything. I'll talk to you later. Oh, Jelly Jam's sleeping back here. Oh my gosh, look at her go. Oh, she's gonna bite me. Okay, goodbye.